For me, Dark Souls 3 sort of happened before I even beat Dark Souls 2. I was so in love with Dark Souls 2 that during the same Steam sale that I bought it, I also bought Dark Souls 3. Although, little did I know that my stinky little laptop couldn't handle Dark Souls 3, no matter how low I made the graphical quality or resolution. But playing what little I could at 2 frames a second, I was loving what I was seeing. But I couldn't play it, and I didn't play it until I grabbed my GTX 1060 later that year. But at that point, I had not only played Dark Souls 2, but also Dark Souls Remastered on my Nintendo Switch. Much like the games before it, I've played Dark Souls 3 a fair amount of times, and it's the game I have the most time in. But I'd say it's the one I've actually played the least. As of this video, I've only done 8 or so playthroughs for Dark Souls 3, compared to, I think, 10 for Dark Souls 2 and 16 for Dark Souls. The only reason I have so much time in Dark Souls 3 is because I used to spend hours doing co-op as a warrior of sunlight, most of the time spent waiting to be summoned. Fun times. Fun times. But even coming off of my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3, I was a little disappointed. I certainly wasn't as excited to replay the game the same way I was for Dark Souls 1 and 2, and even after the playthrough I did for this video, I can't say I am as enamored with the game as I am the others. Coming off of the previous Souls games, Dark Souls 3 is very, let's say, graphically challenged. Now, graphics aren't something that define my opinion on a game, and I generally believe that graphical prowess should be a lower priority compared to stuff like gameplay and story. But I do believe that nice graphics can lend to the atmosphere of a game. Having good-looking, somewhat realistic graphics often lends to the more depressed and depressive atmosphere of the Souls games. But good graphics take time, something Dark Souls 3 didn't have. While I couldn't find any exact numbers for full-on development time, Dark Souls 3 started development somewhere in 2013, at the exact same time Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne were in development, and it's believed that Hidetaka Miyazaki joined development of Dark Souls 3 sometime during Bloodborne or its DLC's development. So at most, Dark Souls 3 had about 2 years of full-on development time, possibly much less. Most of the other Souls games had a minimum of at least 2 or 3 years, not including DLC development time. While never a main priority, previous FromSoft games spent a decent amount of time on graphical upgrades. Compare Dark Souls to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 has decent-looking real-time shadows, photorealistic lighting, and generally higher quality textures and models. While not perfect, it's fair to say that on a purely technical level, Dark Souls 2 is by and large more graphically impressive than Dark Souls. Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, basically uses Bloodborne's engine, which is built off a Dark Souls engine and changes a handful of things. Chromatic aberration is gone, there are some small global lighting changes, and the materials used fit the Dark Souls aesthetic instead of Bloodborne. And while Bloodborne's engine is good, it's clearly lacking in some departments, especially compared to the best of what Dark Souls 2's engine could offer. Shadows in particular leave a lot to be desired in Dark Souls 3. Shadows are generally baked in and often in strange ways, creating weird, muddy, and unsatisfying shadows. And when real-time shadows are used, they're often limited to specific areas and not perfectly implemented. Real-time shadows will often pop in and out of existence, even in areas that look like they should have them. And not only do shadows pop in, but many objects have really abrupt pop-in, both LODs and base objects, especially in the Farron Swamp. And it sure doesn't help that a lot of the textures are of fairly low quality, with what looks to be low-quality normal mapping, leading to flat-looking textures and objects. And not only can the textures look flat, but the lighting can as well. Or it can just look bad, with random bright spots and muddy colors. Speaking of, the colors in Dark Souls 3 aren't always used well. From Software has shown they can use more realistic washed-out colors well, in Demon Souls. But in Dark Souls 3, the color choice often makes the game either look very bland or kind of unpleasant. And the culmination of all these issues is the Catacombs of Carthus. Everything is muddy. Muddy colors, muddy textures, muddy lighting, muddy shadows. For me, the Cock is one of the worst looking areas in the whole Souls series. I'm going to make a bold statement. I believe that none of Dark Souls 3's graphics can surpass the best of what Dark Souls 2 has to offer, at least on a purely technical level. Take note of that last part. Purely technical level. Dark Souls 3 isn't a bad looking game, its art style usually overcomes the graphical stank. It's just a shame that for the big send-off to the Dark Souls trilogy, the graphics are one of the weaker points of the game. But speaking of art style, one of the simple things that I really enjoy about Dark Souls 3 is just how big certain things feel and are. Sure, the world map at large is pretty small and compact, and most of the levels, I would argue, are fairly average in size, but the few levels and things within the world that are massive feel amazing. Traveling the rafters in the towering Cathedral of the Deep and Grand Archives, or trudging through the humongous Faron Swamp, lets the player see and feel how almost comically colossal the world is, adding to the oppressive atmosphere. And that's not to say that the past Souls games haven't had massive things. Most of the levels in Demon's Souls are pretty big, specifically the Boletarian Palace and Stonefang Tunnel. Anor Londo and the Undead Burg in Dark Souls are decently big, and Aleum Lois in Dark Souls 2 feels like a legitimate kingdom. But none of these places feel as big as Lothric. More than any other place, Lothric's landmarks feel the most like they're always towering over or swallowing the player, always reminding them of just how small they are. It really helps with one of the more praised aspects of Dark Souls 3's world design, the ability to see many locations in one area, like Irithyll, Faron, Lothric Castle, Archdragon Peak, and the Cathedral of the Deep, all from the Undead Settlement. Being able to see almost every area in the game from the high wall really sets the mood for the journey early on. The world is very big, imposing, and breaking, and it's your job to somehow do something about it. And while I still stand by my statement that it ultimately doesn't add anything truly meaningful to the gameplay, at least not in the same way as Dark Souls, it's still an effective way to show the world to the player and enhance the atmosphere. Rather, it's the bosses of Dark Souls 3 that add something meaningful to the experience, at least for me, and for one specific reason. Dark Souls 3 introduces something truly amazing to the franchise. There are no absolutely awful bosses. Each previous Souls game had a boss that the majority of players loathe, the most famous example being the Bed of Chaos, and personal examples for me are the Four Kings, Zolin and Lud, Royal Rat Vanguard, and the Dragon God, just to name a few. Comparatively, the very worst of Dark Souls 3's bosses teeter on the edge of bad and passable, such as the Spear of the Church. This fight is designed around PvP, but it fully expects players to go into the fight with a summon or two. So if you're a solo host, the first part of the fight basically becomes a DPS test so you don't get bumped dealing with two enemies that can heal. I think it would have been fair to make the fight semi-modular depending on how many phantoms a host has, adding more painting guardians for phantom and having none for solo hosts. Another example for me would be the Crystal Sage. I think for a boss so early on, they shouldn't be as powerful as they are, because most players are going to have awful magic defenses and low health, making the Sage a lot harder than it probably should be. Granted, an argument could be made that it's probably designed to be fought after making it to Irithyll and realizing the doll is needed to get in. Although, it seems most players tend to fight the Crystal Sage before Volnir or the Abyss Watchers, based on Steam achievement and True Achievements data, so it was still a fight that was early on for most. And while I was jesting a little at the beginning, overall the boss quality is not only far better than every previous Souls game, it easily has the most amazing bosses, at least for me. The Abyss Watchers, the Dragon Slayer armor, the Champ, Pontiff Sullivan, the Nameless King, the Twin Princes, the Soul of Cinder, Dark Eater Midir, and Slave Knight Gale. Especially the latter two, I love fighting them so much that I used to spend hours as a phantom helping people fight them. And while I think we can thank FromSoft's long experience for the more quality bosses, it's safe to say that some part of the better quality bosses comes from the melting pot that Dark Souls 3 is. What do I mean by that? Well, it's no secret that Dark Souls 3 is almost like an ice cream, or a taco, filled with many different flavors. There's inspiration from not just Dark Souls 1 and 2, but Demon's Souls, Bloodborne, and probably beyond. But this melting pot quality has many consequences. While there are improvements to most bosses, meshing some of the best of what Bloodborne has to offer with the best the Soul series has to offer, there had to be some major changes to the combat to account for the Bloodborne part. Combat became faster, and stamina management, as well as poise, became less relevant. Granted, stamina management really only existed in Dark Souls 2, and for specific builds in Dark Souls and Demon's Souls, and the same still stands for Dark Souls 3. But with the lower stamina costs for rolling, stamina management further falls to the wayside. Not to the same degree as Bloodborne, but still more than past Souls games. Although the lower focus on stamina management does work with the faster combat speed, which was undoubtedly influenced by Bloodborne. While a problem to some, I'm personally okay with this change for the most part. Faster bosses work better with faster combat. Some bosses push the speed to a point where it can be unfun, namely Frida, but those cases are rare. Rather, it's the enemies that often make the combat unfun. A lot of enemies have seemingly become more aggressive, spammy, screamy, and poisey, and they often come in groups or pairs. Now, I've said that I don't hate the ganks in Dark Souls 2, and that's because there's usually a way to gain the upper hand in a gank, either through smart weapon choice or using the environment to your advantage, which was often the most effective way to take out groups of enemies. In Dark Souls 3, it's very difficult to use the environment, because, taking another design choice from Bloodborne, the environments are usually very wide and sparse in the middle, making it difficult to funnel or even group enemies. And this is when the overhaul to the poise system starts to rear its ugly head. Poise is now hyper armor, which doesn't lend itself well to fighting groups. The player could be cornered or surrounded with no way to get out, or try to attack but constantly have their attack cancelled. And because of this, weapon choice no longer really matters. Sure, weapons with longer range or the right weapon art, namely Perseverance, will help, but rarely to the same degree as in Dark Souls 2. The only thing that really matters is raw damage output and speed. In Dark Souls 2, I almost always carry around multiple weapons depending on the types of encounters I'll be dealing with, and swap between them as needed. In Dark Souls 3, I have multiple weapons so I can play with different movesets depending on my mood. And getting good isn't the perfect solution. It helps, but there isn't much that can be done when a player is having to deal with 4 or 5 dogs constantly nipping them in the ankles, with no way to escape. With this massive change to Poise, Poise has shifted its power from groups to one-on-ones. Now, the experienced players will say, use a weapon with Perseverance, or be sneaky and snipe them, and such advice like that. And I broadly agree with them. Players should use any reasonable option at their disposal to overcome a tough challenge in a game like Dark Souls. But with the changes made to Poise in Dark Souls 3, 5 dogs, 3 knights, tons of rats, or those annoying fucking Corvians, all cornering and spam attacking a player to death, often don't care about those solutions. The knights are too bulky to take out in a sufficient amount of hits, the dogs and rats too spammy, and the Corvians are just a pain in the ass. Basically, imagine if every enemy was Black Flame Frida, but some of them scream like Lawrence. Which is really annoying, because some of the enemies are pretty fun to fight one-on-one, like the Ring and Lothric Knights, Herald Legion Knights, Millwood Knights, Black Knights, and Hollow Manservants, just to name a few. When in one-on-ones, the borrowed DNA from Bloodborne really gets to shine, but when put in groups, that DNA starts to fall apart, especially with the ganky enemies that scream. But not only does Dark Souls 3 borrow the screams and more from Bloodborne's design, it also borrows a lot from Dark Souls 1. Which I feel lowers the melting pot quality, because it's mostly a melting pot between Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne. And that makes sense. If Dark Souls 3 is supposed to be a big send-off to the Souls games, it makes sense to draw a lot of inspiration from the most popular games. But it doesn't really feel inspired when you're going through a shallower version of Anor Londo with Silver Knights that have had some Bloodborne injected into them. And it's a shame, because Irithyll Prison, a level callback to the Latria Prison in Demon's Souls, is pretty good. It's not a clear-cut copy and paste with some Control X happening. There's new design choices, both big and small, like the changes to the jailers, or the overall theme of the prison. But it would have been nice to see more level callbacks to different levels from past games, instead of just the popular choices. I would have loved to see a level somewhat similar in theme to No Man's Wharf or the Shrine of Storms, but with new ideas and mechanics. But there's not only level callbacks, but a decent number of enemies feel like leftovers from the development of past games, namely Bloodborne. Frida, the Demon Prince, and the Pontiff Knights being some of the most prominent examples I can think of. People that know more about Bloodborne can probably name more. Now, it's not uncommon for FromSoft to repurpose unused ideas from their past games in their new games, but they usually mold their ideas to fit the game that they're making. But with the aforementioned enemies, you can tell they're more fitting for Bloodborne, if not in design, then in combat. Frida is stupid fast, and in her last phase especially, is really aggressive and has blisteringly long combos. This probably would have worked better in Bloodborne, where your character is fast and has quick parrying, as opposed to Dark Souls 3, where the speed is somewhere between Bloodborne and Dark Souls. The other two enemies are better molded for Dark Souls 3. While fast and aggressive, the Pontiff Knights have very few, though infamous, long combos. And the Demon Prince has been nicely molded for Dark Souls 3, but it's pretty obvious that it was meant to be parried, with the free crits the game gives during the boss fight. But I would have liked to see more repurposed ideas from Demon's Souls, or Dark Souls 2. Or hell, even just a level callback to Dark Souls 2 that wasn't just another damn swamp. The Earthen Peak area in the Dreg Heap is a sad misunderstanding of what the actual Earthen Peak is. Imagine FromSoft taking another stab at the original concept for the gutter, but fitting it for Dark Souls 3. Instead, they neutered Anor Londo before copy-pasting it into Dark Souls 3, and added another swamp to call back to Dark Souls 2. Of course, having said all of that, I still really like Dark Souls 3. I wouldn't have gotten all the achievements or played the game as many times as I have if I didn't. But I can't deny that as a completed package, Dark Souls 3 does disappoint me somewhat. But moving away from my opinions, let's move on to yours, the viewer. What are your thoughts on Dark Souls 3? Or this video, or even my opinions? If you don't feel like commenting and want more of my content, I have videos on Dark Souls 1 and 2 ready for you to watch. And if you don't want to do that either, then all I have to say is thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Have a good one.